about 7 years ago, I had the fortune of meeting her when she was in Pakistan for the Lahore Literature Festival and to attend the launch of the Urdu translation of one of her books, The Crow Eaters. And the moment we met, we immediately connected, we clicked. And I was very lucky to have done a portrait and then shadow her for 3 days, documenting her while she was in Lahore and getting a glimpse into her life. Bapsi, thank you so much for this honor and for honoring me with your time today.
It is my honor to speak to you. Thank you, Mobeen.
So first of all, how have you been doing during this time since the strange new world began? One of the things I have always wondered is, uh, as a writer, how would you see this experience as a story?
Well, it's just affecting everybody. Everybody seems to be confined to their homes. Interaction has become very limited. Whenever you go out, one has to be so careful. And I've just now had my birthday, and my brother and sister-in-law came. A lot of people couldn't come, but that was enough. So it has slowed down things, definitely.
It goes without saying that all of us know who you are, and readers and the literary world celebrates you. Even I'm reading one of your books these days as we speak. Uh, but for a lot of readers who are just starting out, I would love to know what inspired you to be a writer and what was your story?
I went on my honeymoon after marriage. I went to the Karakoram Highway. General Safta Butt was building the Karakoram Highway from the Pakistan end, and he invited my husband there to the camp. And my husband realized it was a nice, cheap interview, sort of a honeymoon. So once I was there, I was totally captivated by everything I saw. The camp was on the brink of the river Indus. The Indus was a massive blue-green ribbon of color just floating down. And there were the big mountains. The river was magnificent. I think it must be at least a mile wide where we were, which was a lagoon, although it was swift. The river was always swift. And we went on it on a raft, my husband and I. And suddenly, from up behind us in the mountains, we heard someone scream and then somebody else shout. And our boatman said, he was just doing the raft with one oar. And he said, we have to go back, there's danger. And suddenly we saw on the opposite bank, as if the people had been born out of the sand, 5 or 6 tribesmen just lying like that, looking at us, casually. And this was dangerous, because we were intruding into their territory.
Right.
We should not be too close there. And it was dangerous for me as a woman too. So they quickly took us away from there. So that was one experience. And then, of course, Safta Butt was a very good raconteur. And he had stories about the people there. And one of the stories that attracted me most was that he said, about a month ago, the Jawans saw a young girl from the Punjab with an old tribal on the road. And they wondered, what is this old tribal doing with a young Punjabi girl?
Right.
And they brought them to the colonel. And Safta Butt said, I asked her, are you all right? And the girl said, yes. And the man said, I'm taking her across the river to marry her to my nephew. Now Safta Butt knew that these are totally wild people. And I did not realize what the girl was to go through either,
Right.
And then we heard that the girl had gone and got married. And about a month after her marriage, around that time, they heard, Saftabat heard that she had run away. And those are absolutely, you can get lost in that maze of the Karakoram Mountains. These are the world's tallest mountains. And that poor girl must have just been terrified there. And she ran, and eventually her aim was to get to a thin bridge which led to where we were, Patan. That was the little station we were at. And when she came to the bridge, the tribesmen killed her. And this story just haunted me. And I wanted to tell this girl's story of what could have happened to this little girl, 15, 16-year-old, married to a tribesman. And what must she have gone through to run away into those wild mountains, knowing how wild they were. Pathless, no pagdandis, nothing. And I sat down to write about. I thought I'd write a short story that I went there and this happened and she ran away and she was killed. But as I was writing, I found I had to create a background for the narrator, for the girl, how she grew up, because she had to have some substance and reality for her to be interesting. So automatically, it was my first book. And you have to be an instinctive writer to do this. And instinctively, I knew that I had to introduce the girl as somebody who lived in the rougher areas of Lahore. And as I was writing it, the story automatically started to unravel. The subconscious writes the story. And I placed the girl as she was married, happy. There were drum beats, the tribals beat their drums and dance around. And she was, in her room, bent over like a bride with the gungat down there. And then her husband, after a long time, came. And he was a very handsome young man. She could just about see him. And their first night was romantic and full of love. And for a few days this happened. And then I had to introduce the change. I was now manipulating the story. So I created brothers for this man. And one of the brothers was pretty evil. And he said, "Why are you being so soft with this girl, This is not how we treat our women." And he egged her on so that he became harsh with her. And one day when she was sitting on a ledge looking at the road opposite from which she had crossed the bridge and come, and she saw an army jeep pass by, and she just waved to it, not that they could see her even. But her husband had followed her, and he saw her do this, and he was furious and so jealous and so enraged that he beat the life out of her very hard. And he treated her badly for a few days. And she decided the only thing I can do is run away, otherwise I'll be killed by her.
Yeah.
And this is the whole story that unfolds, how she runs.
Thank you so much for you sharing this whole origin story. It's inspiring for me because I am a hearing impaired individual myself, and I rely a lot on the sixth sense, as my mother would call it, for photography, to be able to observe everything. And when I read about the characters in your book, mostly Freddy in the Crow Eaters, or Jalbanu or Patli, all these characters.
Yes, yes.
I can actually tell the whole description, the way you describe how they're feeling physically and psychologically. And that has really played an important part in helping me do more detailed portraits. So what you just shared right now really helped me. I also had the privilege of being at the launch of the Urdu translation of the Crow Eaters, and I got to witness a very beautiful moment between you and Banu Kutia. May she rest in peace. I'm always so curious about your bond and friendship with her and her husband, late husband, Ashfaq Ahmed, and many other historical personalities of Pakistan. I would love for you to share any details, please.
Well, we used to live in a house in Gulberg in a flat. Behind the wall was a huge plot of land, and it belonged to the Urdu Markaz.
Right.
And this was run by Ashfaq and Banu. The Urdu Markaz was run by Ashfaq. And somehow it's through that we met. Somehow or the other, I went to the back or they came to the front, but we connected. And as soon as I knew this is Banu, I realized she is the writer. And they were very keen and happy to meet me. And Ashfaq was her husband was a very good-looking man, but he died young. Soon after I met him. And then she started talking that we were known as the Elizabeth and Barrett Browning of Pakistan. This was a very, very romantic love story. I have a feeling she belonged to a totally different religion, and there must have been a very big struggle for her to marry Ashfaq Ahmed, And she had survived that struggle and come to Pakistan from wherever she was. And I suspect, it was a suspicion she revealed once, that she was originally probably a Sikh. And at that time, she was, of course, very beautiful. Ashfaq was very handsome. And they fell madly in love. And I can imagine what a hard time it was for her to come away from a family home to Pakistan and live with Ashfaq. But she was very happy with him.
She was truly wonderful. I also had the privilege of photographing her, and in her presence, you could just feel so much peace, so much serenity around her, even if she did not say a word. And every time I would bid farewell to her, she would pat my head like her very own son. It was just wonderful people. And it's such a wonderful anecdote that you've shared with her because uh, it's a classic example, it's a great example of how authors, how artists support each other, look to each other in difficult times. And I think, unfortunately, in today's time, you do not see a lot of that because people feel threatened. And I think, we have so much to learn from your friendship to the amazing grades.
Well, I was very fortunate. But to begin with, there was so much jealousy. To begin with, I'd met Faiz Sahib. He had read, it so happened that he was sitting next to my brother in the plane coming from Pindi to Lahore. And Faiz Sahib was reading a book and he said, I think this book is written by a Parsi woman. I wonder if you know her. And he showed the book, the few pages to my brother. And my brother read a few pages. He said, I think this is my sister. So they came straight from the airport to my house. And as Faiz Saab sort of started talking, and then at that time I used to have in the bedroom an alcove, one air conditioner one would have, and that was in the bedroom. So we were talking about, he was talking about the books and all. He said, yes, yours is a good second-rate book. So I said, thank you, Faiz Saab, coming from him. Then I said, what is the first trade books I read? Yeah, then I said one or two books of the Indian subcontinent. And he said, yeah, there's a good third-rate books. Or sorry, second. And I said, Professor, what do you think is a first-rate book in that case? He said, oh, Shakespeare, Milton, people like that. And then, of course, that stopped me from asking further questions. But then he sat down and he made himself comfortable. He chatted for a long time and invited me to come to Russia. And he had my book published. He recommended it to some publishers. Now, at this time, a bunch of young Pakistani men were there. And they couldn't bear it that this woman, unknown totally to anybody, was being published in Russia and getting good reviews. And they made a big noise there running me down. And the editor who was editing this book wrote to me. She said, I'm sorry, I can't write the praise as I want to because there are young men who are saying so much against you that I cannot write the full praise I want to, or something like that. And that's when I realized that I had aroused among the young people a lot of jealousy. And it wasn't until I was established, almost acknowledged by everybody as a writer, that they started approaching me as friends.
But my experiences have mostly been limited to parts of Karachi or Quetta. Your books have given us a whole window of what it is like to be a Parsi in Lahore and in Punjab. I would love to know a little bit more about that. How is it like being there?
As a child, I had polio. So I was not sent to school. The doctor had suggested, she's not going to become a doctor or a professor. Well, why send her to school? So my childhood was extremely lonesome. My leg was in a cast for a while and then it became fine. And I spent my time, because I was not allowed to go to school or any place, reading. Fortunately, on my birthday, on my brother's birthdays, the only gifts we got were books. And my shelf, we had a small 4-shelf, 5-shelf library. And one of the shelves was starting to fill up with the books, about by Indians and about India. And this reading them fed my imagination, and that's what made me want to write also. But growing up there was a lonesome experience to begin with. And then when I was about 15, I cheated my way literally through the metric exam, and at 16 joined Kinnaird College. I got a first division, of course, through total cheating. I don't know, in those days, all this was possible. I did not know maths at all. I was very good at drawing. So instead of maths, I'd taken up drawing. And they'd given a jug and a basin, I'd drawn it beautifully. I looked at the other people's and they'd drawn horrible little things. So then I was satisfied on that. And the rest, anyway, I passed with first division. And now it was time for me to join college. So I joined Kinnaird College. And for the first time in my life, I was with young people my age and able to listen a little. I listened more than talked, of course, And then I got a very good Pathan friend, Nishat Abad. And she and I became almost inseparable. We were all the time together. And the girls would make fun of us, like, oh, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your husband, wife, that sort of funny things. But we were good friends always. And even after I got married, we would sit out in the garden. It was a very small garden in Gulberg. She would come and visit us. And among the visitors was the judge, Dora Patel, during the Bhutto trial. He was a good friend, and he seemed to like me and my husband. And he would, whenever he was, after his judgments, and he was doing the hearing in Islamabad. And as soon as they had some free time from the court, he would come over to Lahore, stay in the that club, I forget the name, Cosmopolitan Club or some, it was another fancy club. And every evening he would visit us and he would talk about the case, Right. And apparently Bhutto was treated very badly. He talked about Benazir's appearance there, but our hearts went out to the way Bhutto was treated. And we had idolized Bhutto before this and taken out processions. I'd taken part in a woman's procession saying Bhutto Zindabad, Zindabad at one stage, And I think a lot of the people in the nation wept when they realized that they say he hanged himself, but God knows he died there cruelly.
So recently I read an article on The Guardian, which is titled The Last of the Zoroastrians. And the writer talks about his grandfather being cremated as opposed to being laid to rest in the Tower of Silence. And some segments of the community frowned upon it. And I also noted that a little bit of the story was also being told in the Crow Eaters time to time. For example, when Jarbanu was very happy to see some vultures, and there was a lot of back and forth between her and Freddie. Like Freddie said, I'll put you on top of that hill. So I see a little bit of that conflict going on there. And that book was set in 1900, if I remember correctly. Do you think that some traditions are bound to adapt and change over the years?
Oh, yes. In Lahore, of course, there were just so few Parsis, Even at the height of our community, which was before partition, apparently, we were 400. At partition, a lot of Parsis went away to Bombay and places, Mostly to Bombay, because that's where the mainly Parsis were. And there were only about 400 left or something like that.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any sort of tower of silence in Lahore. After all, how many vultures, how many 3 or 4 dead bodies a year would not feed too many vultures, So we had to make a graveyard. And that is how we got our graveyard in Lahore instead of which I consider myself as a yucky custom, I'd rather be buried than be eaten by a vulture.
So may I ask which book has had the most significant impact on your writing?
Each book has been an enchanting experience because I have been immersed in creativity, and you yourself are a creative person. There is no bliss compared to the bliss of just being lost in writing a book and being creative and being immersed with the characters. So that has helped. And then I was very fortunate. I think the book that I liked best was Jangalwala Sahib. But the book that seemed to attract the most attention was The Pakistani Bride.
Right.
because suddenly there were a whole lot of pirated films being made on it.
Yeah. Speaking of this, a friend of mine actually finished your book, Earth 1947, in just one day. In just
Oh,
one day, he
really?
actually finished it. Yeah, I'll have to. I wish I could read that fast. Speaking of that, how was the experience of visiting the film set when the film starring Amir Khan was being made on your book, Earth 1947?
I was on the set all the time. A cousin of mine from Bombay had come with me for a while, and she went away after 16 days. And I just had fun there. You know,
Uh,
I adopted Rahul Khanna as my son, and although he was almost in a way contemporary, and I found Amar Khan very shy. He wasn't very open to converse, and I felt he was very self-conscious about his English, and it was difficult for him probably. Anyway, I found him more reserved, but he was very friendly with Nandita Das. He opened up with her totally. And when the people got to know somehow that Amar Khan was there, this was in Delhi, the shoot was in Delhi. Oh my God, far away, there was a bridge. The bridge was crowded with people. Whenever I would come, people would be dropping, literally touching my feet. जी हमें आमिर खान से मिलवा दे, प्लीज हमें आमिर खान से मिलवा, उमर भान आपकी दुआ करेंगे. They were just dying to meet Amir Khan. He was so damn popular. Nobody wanted to meet Rahul Khanna or Nandita Das or anybody. Just Amir Khan, Amir Khan.
from your perspective, after experiencing this pandemic, do you think there is hope for us to change for the better? And where do you think we go on from here as a community and as a collective humanity?
It's a very sad time to go through with so many deaths around one. And it does change people. I think it does make people realize how short and fragile life can be. And, I think it does change people and make them realize the value of life.
These are words that all of us can learn so much from. And I can actually tell you that throughout the summer, which was the hardest part of being quarantined because it's so hot. And then some of the summer was also during Ramzan. So it was very difficult to pass the time while keeping fast.
Mm.
But your books also, in part, also kept me sane. I can actually keep this in front of me. I have this in front of me, and then I have this, which you very kindly
Oh,
signed for
wow.
me, and then but this one I'm cherishing the most, and I'm very lucky. I can read actually 4 of your stories on this. It's such an honor,
Oh,
and
it's an
um,
honor.
and
Yeah.
you actually signed it for my mom over there. So it's so
Okay.
special. So we actually have quite a history. So Bapsi, thank you so much for sharing such words of wisdom, your incredible story, and this will inspire a lot of writers, a lot of artists. It has definitely inspired me, pushed me to reinvent. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.